Welcome to Future Customer Value, where global thought leaders share their career-defining moments. Welcome, everyone, to our next episode of Future Customer Value. Got a guest on today, a good friend of mine and a fellow enthusiast of all things customer value, Tiffany Gonzalez. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
Good morning. We're actually recording this on a Saturday, nice weekend edition of the show. And I want to give everybody a quick intro to how we met because it's a pretty cool story and I think so indicative of the world that we live in. So I think we actually were connected on Pavilion, a Slack community, which is for go-to-market leaders. And we met up at a CRO event in New York back in 2022, I believe, at a dinner at an Indian restaurant. And we really hit it off. We had a big group of people with us, but I remember uniquely the conversations that we had. I was like, man, Tiffany's super cool. We got to stay in touch. So we ended up doing that and met up in Austin a few times and I think other places as well. So it's been really awesome getting to know you, Tiffany, and excited for this conversation.
Likewise, I'm excited for this conversation. All things customer value are really some of my favorite things to discuss. So glad to be here.
Awesome. So to give everybody an introduction into your awesome career through the tech world, Tiffany's currently at Microsoft running growth engineering and RevOps for the business applications team, which includes Microsoft Dynamics amongst many other tools that we're all familiar with. Prior to that, Tiffany was at Coupang based out of South Korea, which is awesome. Definitely some cool stories there. Prior to Coupang was running operations at Amazon at AWS. So another key tech player that we are all intimately familiar with. We're also on AWS. And prior to AWS was at T-Mobile in the telecom space. So really cool juncture of both sales, operations roles for brand name companies that we're all aware of, both in the US and abroad. Tiffany's got a really cool story. So let's dive into it. Anything you want to kick off with before we start your stories?
No, I would just say the fun part about, all of these companies over the years is that even though I've worked in very, very large companies, very often I'm in the incubation areas of these companies, in the startup spaces or in spaces that are undergoing rapid change management. So it's been really fun to be able to exist within this kind of very scrappy place inside of these very large companies with kind of the resources and the data that affords. So it's so that's where I've been really grateful to be able to see both sides of that coin through the years.
I love it. And in our prep for this call, I think so many of your experiences have shaped what you're doing now and it all compounds. So love to dive into that. This podcast is brought to you by Foresight, a full service value realization platform designed to help you unlock growth in every single account. For more information on Foresight, please email them at info@gainforesight.co. That is info@gainforesight.co. And they'll be in touch. Well, let's start off early in your career, T-Mobile, when you were based in Seattle, before your big jaunt around the world. And you were in the onboarding space, helping customers get onboarded to T-Mobile's business applications, which I didn't realize they had a whole enterprise application suite. So that's I'd love to hear more about that. But talk to us about your world there. What was the key needs? What were you trying to achieve with these customers? And paint that picture for us.
Yeah, it was a different time and space, but it was also an economically challenged time. So when I was looking for jobs in the tech industry, it was like, oh, where can I get a job? And I found this role. And my role was really around implementing B2B, mid-market and enterprise contracts. And so when it started, it was a lot of training of, here's the legal terms and here's what this contract means and here's how this technology is implemented. And I started going through this with customers and realized that they were doing it because they felt they had to, but that wasn't what they were really looking for. And so as I started getting into conversations with some of these large customers, I realized that through this implementation, they had been sold on the vision, but through this implementation, they were really looking to understand, how do I connect value to the needs of my organization? And it was very, very, it's simple things now, but back then it was very kind of complicated because that's when BlackBerries were the predominant smartphone and iPhones had not been made yet. And a mobile app and connectivity to enterprise systems didn't exist in an integrated way that technology works today. So we were in this space where the mobile device was the access point, and we were trying
Wow.
to figure out how to connect enterprise systems through this access point, because everybody could see the potential, but we didn't necessarily have hands-on reality yet, right? Because it was still in the building phase. So
For
that's where
sure.
a lot of it started. And I realized that those legal conversations really morphed into something else.
That is really fascinating because I feel like it's such a prescient moment for what is happening today. It's a new ecosystem, that mobile application space back in when T-Mobile was pioneering this. Now in the AI world we have today, we're all figuring out what are the use cases for these applications. How will enterprises leverage them in a way that's aligned to what they're trying to achieve? And I think these lessons always recycle as time goes on new technologies evolve. So love to dive in deeper there. One thing that you said really resonated with me is the change management side. And a lot of onboarding, and I've been in implementations and onboarding myself for large CRM platforms. And it's easy to get into checklist mode where you're clicking buttons and saying, this is done, this is done, this is done. We imported their data, their dashboards are live. We did some QA testing, awesome, but that's not really change management, right? So how do we transform onboarding? What was your experience as transforming onboarding from checklist management to change management to really align to what the buyer cared about, right? What they're trying to achieve in a use case with business applications.
Yeah, and well, my experience at T-Mobile and just throughout the years of implementing different solutions and using them, implementing them, and existing with them across various kind of team sizes and economic spaces, the biggest thing was getting away from what I wanted to say. And that sounds so I guess obvious, but when I was at T-Mobile and younger in career, it wasn't so obvious to me, right? Because my sales training and my field implementation training, it had all been around making sure that we're continuing to connect to the value of what the company wanted to say about a specific product or a solution. And I realized that that was not earning trust. And so when I went through those implementations, it was all about what is your use case and how do we make sure that your use case is fully met. And that isn't just a dashboard, that isn't just a technical implementation. The way I started to think about it is when my customers were able to use technology without ever thinking about using technology. That's when it became additive and a part of the actual solution, and not just another tax on time and space and mental capacity, right?
Right.
That's when it really became successful, because then it was really an enablement rather than just another step or another checklist.
For sure. And I think that's what drives for companies, there's two dimensions of value. There's the customer's value, what they're trying to achieve. That helps the company, in this case, T-Mobile, drive top line revenue because the customer's now engaged. But you have to make sure you have that linkage point, right? And the next thing we'll talk about is the internal company value, which is profitability and the operation side. But it first starts with understanding the customer, what their needs are. And could you give us a specific example? You mentioned something about truck drivers managing their equipment, right? And how you had to literally understand what was going through these truck drivers' minds to create these financial transaction systems when you're implementing that. So paint a picture of a real use case for a real person, and how did that drive what change management you were doing?
Yeah, so an example, we did an implementation with a trucking company back in the day, and these are, this is a highly regulated industry, right? We have truck drivers driving big rigs and multiple that have the one truck and then the second truck in the back, right? They're driving these big rigs. There's interstate transit laws. There's laws around how long truck drivers must rest. There's also rules and regulations that the companies have around certain speeds and certain time on road and all of these things to make sure that they're meeting all of the safety regulations and things like that. And so what we were trying to find is a solution where the truck drivers were able to have their mobile device, be able to check them in, check them out, monitor all of these things throughout their workday, alert them when they were heading up to limits, be able to log and manage those transactions so that it wasn't paper log in the truck itself. And there's alternative solutions that people could have used. They could have used laptops, they could have used computers, various things like that. But those back then, those didn't have the mobile connectivity that mobile devices afforded. So we were trying to figure out logistically how to put this all together on a mobile device. And this is back when there wasn't really an app that could solve any of that. So all of this was custom
Wow.
built, custom integrated. And
Yeah.
so it became this really interesting coming together of people and process and regulations and operations into a technical solution that functionally the drivers, the drivers just had on their hip and like clicked a button and then we're done. So it became a value add to the drivers in that perspective.
That's fascinating. I had one of our former investors once say that you have to understand the user at the keystrokes level. What is the end user doing in their workflow? And in this example, it's maybe not a keystroke, but on the road action, right? You're going and passing through exits, you need to log where you're going and all that for drivers. So understanding what is their experience, their lived experience, that is so critical to be able to make any recommendation. And I think that's where a lot of companies often fall in the chasm, right? And lose sight of that. So I think that's it's so important, and it'll shape the rest of our conversation here as well. So one story I wanted to hit on, which is not directly related to your experience doing change management, but it's an awesome story, is when you were the national account manager for Las Vegas. I didn't realize that was a thing, being an account manager for a city. So let's take a detour here and tell us about when you met this eccentric billionaire on the
Yeah.
strip, and what was all of that about?
It was one of the, I'll just call it one of the more surreal experiences of my career. I joke when I tell this story, I joke that I got a call from we'll just say one of the moguls of Las Vegas, from his executive assistants. And they called and they said, Tiffany, can you be here in 45 minutes? And I said, no, I can't. I can be there tomorrow morning, which, let's just say this person is not used to ever getting a no, right?
Right.
But I explained why, and I showed up the next morning with the most expensive business suit I had on and my most expensive shoes. I think it was maybe worth $200, everything, including the shoes and the jewelry, right? So I was dressed to the nines. I showed up in Las Vegas at the casino where this individual lived and was ushered into his office. And I start sitting down, he's asking me questions, and we're talking about just some of the issues that he's having. We're talking about these things. And he stops and he looks at me and he goes, are you nervous right now? And I'm like, yeah, you're only the second billionaire I've met. And apparently he thought that was pretty funny, or an unexpected response. But he's like, well, who's the first one? I'm like, well, I met Bill Gates, but he's from Seattle and I'm from Seattle, and it doesn't really count because you see Bill all around. Like, I know online there's all of these news posts or whatever about Bill standing in line at the burger place, getting his burger and stuff. So it's like, it's not uncommon for Seattle natives to run into Bill, right?
Yeah.
And he thought that was hilarious. And then I would say this is probably the most expensive coaching moment I've had in my career. He put his hand on his arm, he patted my hand, and he said, we all put our pants on one leg at a time, right? And then it went straight back to business. And it was a moment where I understood at a very personal level that regardless of, age or experience or any of those things, that I was able to add value even to people who have literally built empires and billionaires, like billionaires in this space. And I was able to lean into that and really be unafraid that my ability to add value into whatever it is that I'm doing is not contingent on age or experience or seniority or any of those things. So it really changed my ability to deeply engage with people at all levels of the business. And I guess the fun part of that story is then that person was asking me what other meetings I was going to have in the day and how I was getting around. And I told him, oh, I'm going to take taxis. It's Las Vegas. And he's like, no, no, no. And ended up having me chauffeured around in a Bugatti for the day, which is
That's awesome.
the only time I've
Unexpected.
ever been in a Bugatti. So, from now till then, it's never happened again.
See, these are the advantages of getting to know your customer, what they care about. You might get pulled into a Bugatti in Las Vegas. That's really funny, and what a cool story that comes from a very unexpected encounter. So I think it's really awesome to hear how taking that customer-centric mindset at T-Mobile ultimately led you to moving into sales and being that account manager, getting that centricity to know here's how we can really transform a customer to achieve their goals, generate more revenue for the company. That's valued, right? Companies value that and see that. And it's half of the battle is being able to sell the dream. Let's talk about the other half of the battle, which is now realizing the dream and realizing value, which is often not seen externally. It's the operations side, right? It's sales operations, it's transformations, bottom line profitability. And you were deep in this world at Amazon when you were at AWS.
Yeah.
Which complemented what I feel is the customer facing knowledge so well. It's the knowledge of the operation. So talk to us about your time at Amazon, paint the picture of what you were doing there in terms of ops roles and what that taught you.
Yeah, so when I moved to Amazon, and this is a minute ago now. So this is when the FBA, the Fulfilled by Amazon part of the business, was growing a lot. And it was a bit newer, it was growing in its rapid growth stage. I moved into the only bottom line, what I'll say, just pure operational role in my career that I've ever been in. And I did that because I personally felt a need to connect and personally understand what those operations and hands-on operations meant. And in that space at Amazon at FBA, I was able to understand the actual kind of decisions, the operational decisions of the company, how those directly impacted the ability for partners and sellers and marketplace sellers to be more or less profitable, how it changed their ability to drive revenue, right? And it was the first, I had always kind of understood it in abstract or intellectually, but it was the first time that I very personally connected to that. An example, right? If you are an FBA seller on Amazon, and let's say you have, those plastic balls that they put in like kids' ball pits, right?
Yes.
It matters to those sellers if Amazon is FIFOing their products, right? From a manufacturing perspective, like first in, first out from a manufacturing perspective, because if those, and it's not something that you think
Right.
of a plastic ball as kind of like more durable, right? You don't think that there's an expiration date on a plastic ball, right?
Right.
But you dig into it and you realize that when they are first in, first out, that seller saw more sales, more turnover because the quality of the product was higher. And that allowed them to have more predictable supply chain, which allowed them to have additional cost savings, which allowed Amazon to sell more. So like the positive flywheel of just FIFOing a customer's product, even when it seems like a durable product, made a very meaningful difference to this seller over the lifetime of their business. And that's where I really started to understand that operational decisions, everything from, inventory to storage to how people engage with customer care and success and everything like that, very meaningfully changes the top line revenue numbers of a business. And that's just, for me, was like a light bulb moment.
It's a really unique perspective. I feel many leaders have one or the other. It's hard to cross pollinate the two. So awesome that you have done that. And I think folks who can understand how I don't know a better term to use than the sausage is made, right? But however that process works on the back end, that is what gets delivered and aligned to the customer's use cases on the front end. If you can talk to a seller and say, we're we FIFO your products, we know how this process works, well, you're probably getting more sellers on the platform. So I think those two sides are really critical, and the operational excellence that comes with it is what drives the top line ability to sell as well. So that's fascinating. And one other piece here, and we share this in our backstory of having to learn SQL to do operations. My first job out of college was a SQL analyst. I had to do if then where statements, right? And all of that to pull the right data. So how did that play into your world here? Because I know you were particularly good memory for you in the SQL world.
It was transformative in I suggest anybody that is in revenue operations, business operations type space, you don't have to be a SQL expert, but I highly, highly recommend that people learn how to build SQL queries, how to pull their own data, because what it forced me to learn was to force me to understand how the data is actually built and created. It helps me understand the underlying assumptions of the data and where those fallacies existed. And that's very, very difficult to understand if it's only looking at a dashboard or at an analytics output, right? Because that level of detail and understanding, like you were saying, how the sausage is made, that level of understanding is really critical to be able to identify where there are gaps in your systems, your processes, and your customer experience. Because the data, as you put the data together, the data helps you indicate where a problem exists, but it doesn't tell you necessarily the why. And as you get closer and closer to that data, at a very root level, you are able to more quickly get to that why and solve customer problems very, very aggressively, would be the way I'd say it. Like, be able to be very.
For sure. For sure. And be able to think in a data model context is also really powerful, because then you can talk to engineers, you can talk to the folks who are making the technology work and understand how their brain works. And I think that was a big benefit for me after I learned SQL. Then I went to do onboarding implementation for a CRM company. I was migrating folks off of Salesforce, so I had to understand the object structure and the entity relationship diagrams and speak to the customer in a business vernacular, but through the lens of the data model. It's a really powerful skill set. So
It
it's
was very different than the technical sales training that I'd received over the years, right? Because over the years, I'd learned everything from, wireless to distributed antenna systems to mobile devices, mobile apps, mobile security, MDM. Like, I'd learned all of these enterprise level technical solutions, but getting into the data itself empowered me to learn language of engineering in a way that I was able to, cross that bridge and really transform how I was able to connect value to customers through future roles that I had been in. So for me, it was really incredibly transformative.
I couldn't agree more, and I'll also advocate if you are if you have an ability to learn some SQL or to at least think through that lens, you should absolutely do it.
Well, and I was gonna say, like, I am not an engineer. My
Same.
bachelor's degree is in
Yeah.
foreign policy. So like, if I was able to learn
Yeah,
it, I'm like, anybody can learn it.
for sure. And now you've got open it, Chat GPT can help you write the queries and test it out, so that makes it easier. Awesome. Well, my takeaway from that is driving efficiency internally by understanding the engagement model can really help you accelerate revenue, right? The flywheel of revenue on the top line, and make sure you don't erode that top line value because you understand how the sausage is made. So that's great. Well, let's take another trip down memory lane here. And this is your jaunt outside the US at a company called Coupang, where you start to pair these two sides, these two hemispheres of the business world, the top line value, top line revenue, and bottom line operations to create outsized value. So what were you doing there? And also you're in Seoul, which is awesome. So tell us about the context and the environment around what you were doing too.
Yeah, it was. So Coupang is now an IPO company and traded in the United States. So I was there in the several years and run up to IPO, where I was GM of the marketplace business, so the third party part of the business. And it was just this incredible place because we were going through rapid growth, rapid transformation, and really that question of scale as we're trying to, build all of the systems and processes to run up to IPO. And that space created an opportunity for us to really pair engineering systems that drove seller onboarding at scale, along with a human-led sales motion, which really helped drive specific value realization within periods of time, along with self-service onboarding and customer success, so that we were able to rapidly onboard people without human intervention and friction, but also then identify systematically where those sellers and where those customers may have been having troubles or falling out of the process. So it was this really just incredible opportunity to own and work with just incredible talent to drive the customer experience, everything from technical onboarding to people-led onboarding to immediate value realization, to then success and upsell, and continuing to help them build the flywheel and understanding all of those intersectional data points across the entire customer journey, and building people, systems, and processes that influence those and directly addressed those critical inflection points. And it was definitely a process to learn, trial by error, and lots and lots and lots of customer learning. But when we found the recipe that worked for our business, it was transformational. And it was just one of the most remarkable times that I've been able to see all of those things come together.
Wow. Something you said earlier in this conversation, which I think plays so well here in the marketplace context, is to be as much of a value add rather than a tax for the sellers. So that's what's going to keep the sellers coming back and more transactions happening and all of that. So what was an example where you realized that coupon could be a value add rather than a fee that the sellers had to pay as part of being on the platform?
Yeah, so there was this, and there's a bunch of customer seller testimonials on YouTube and on the Coupang website. A lot of them are in Korean, but they're usually subtitled in English, so that a global audience can see them. But one that I remember very specifically was a marketplace seller from Busan, which is in the very south part of Korea. And this person had been a fisherman. His family had been fishermen for generations, right? And they were trusting us to help them come to market to bring their products to Korea going from local to national. They were trusting us to partner with them to help them bring their products to the entire South Korean market. And one of the things that we very personally realized is that, okay, this person's expertise is fishing, is, being able to, cultivate this really great product. They're not experts at e-commerce. They're not experts at, website demand generation. They're not experts at advertising. They're not experts at single detail pages and product listings. Like, how do we shortcut all of those things so that we can create the most optimal space for that seller to engage and be able to use all of those tools without having to become an expert in our tool and our platform? And that didn't mean we restricted the opportunity for people who did want to do all of those things to be able to customize, but we really focused on how do we onboard and help these sellers get to a place where they are very successful as quick as possible without having to jump through hoops. And so that was one of the biggest things that we focused just a ton of our time, effort, and energy on to create a lot of success. And that marketplace seller, they're one of our testimonial sellers today, and their business has continued to scale just in a really meaningful way. You can hear it if you go find the video, but it was just a really fun opportunity to connect.
That's really cool. And being able to remove you're painting a visual for me similar to the truck company for T-Mobile, where you understand their workflows, you got to remove the friction so that they can be better at what they need to do, and you're facilitating that change management. You shouldn't even feel that you're using a technology. It is helping you be better at your job or selling your product or whatever it is. So I think that's a cool way of connecting the two sides, of understanding the operational back end of what needs to happen with what the seller's needs are to create that amazing experience. Super cool, and I want to check that out. That video, we should probably link it in the comments for people to, you can watch the translation and see what that experience is like. Let's also talk about your time in Korea. So another personal detour here. When I've never been to Seoul, I would love to go. It's been on my list for a while, but obviously karaoke is very popular in Korea, and I mean everywhere, but primarily it's like where it started. So talk to us about experiences you had doing karaoke with your coworkers, because I think this is a great story.
I'm sure at some point some of those videos will show up.
We won't link those in the comments.
Exactly. Me singing zombie or something like that in the karaoke booth, right? But one of the things that I really just, the Korean culture, Korea is just a gorgeous country. The food, the culture, the people, the environment, it's just wonderful. It's such a safe and just modern, gorgeous environment. One of the things that I really, really loved is the team really became an extended family. And so the team that I was part of, we would do our all hands on a regular basis and all of those things. And the running kind of joke is that they would make me sing karaoke in front of the entire team. And it was always like a Korean K-pop song. And so I would, and they would never tell me what K-pop song it was. So I would like be furiously studying before, hoping that I remembered, you know, the BTS song or the Blackpink song, whatever it was, hoping that I remembered the words. But it just became a way to really make sure that we humanize each other, and that we're not only engaging in culture, but we're connecting as people and as humans, right? And it was an opportunity, especially as I was there and run up to the pandemic and everything like that. It became a way for us to stay connected across language and across cultures, and really be able to continue to connect as people. So it's one of my just very fond memories of the team, and it's just so much fun.
Love that. And those will last beyond any company or professional experience, right? That's what it's all about.
Always.
So let's bring it to today now. After the pandemic, you came to Austin from your time in Korea and landed at Microsoft to be doing what you're doing now, growth engineering, RevOps, and connecting a lot of dots and a lot of data points. So I would love to dive into your world and hear, and what is your current point of view on how to leverage all the data you have at Microsoft to drive both top line and bottom line revenue excellence?
Yeah, so I think, you know, and I, of course, I want to caveat, these are my opinions, not those of my employer. Like that is very important, right? I think one of the biggest challenges that we all have across revenue operations, and I'm at a company where we have some of the biggest data in the world, right? The challenge is, how do we make sure that we're understanding value inside of all of the data, and that it's not just more data and more noise, right? Because all technology, all SaaS companies, you know, all cloud service companies, they have a lot of data of how users and individuals are interacting with their products across everything from web to the SaaS products, et cetera. And there's a lot of data there. So how do you understand value and not just activity? That's one of the hardest things that that I think really is in front of everybody across the RevOps space, to really make sure that we're connecting value and not just busyness, right? And that value is really hard to understand in customer journeys across so many different surfaces and experiences, and the fact that customers have very different opinions of value, right?
Yes.
So that's the biggest thing. It's like, how do you systematically understand that, and then also make sure that you're understanding what that value realization is?
Absolutely. It's such a personal endeavor, and something I always like to say is value is in the eye of the beholder. It is what they feel it is. One person might be getting a ton of value, somebody else not, because they have a different perspective and different heuristics that they're using to determine if they're getting value. So the challenge is, how do we go to the customer engage them in the right way where they can talk about value through the lens of what you ultimately support, and it's connected, and then transform the change management and journey for the customer through that. So it's a big lift, and that's the intention of this podcast. That's the intention for why we're doing what we're doing in the market, and it's a really exciting time, but also ton of directions you could go down. I think one piece that you had mentioned in our prep call here is we're kind of coming full circle, right? Where mobility was 20 years ago when you're at T-Mobile, and now where we are today with the trillions petabytes or whatever the highest storage unit is. We have that much data every second being generated. We have AI that's trying to make sense of all this stuff. But if we're not aligning all the data, all the translation layers with the AI to map to the customer value, that's a hugely missed opportunity. So I feel like that has to be forefront for a lot of companies, and thinking about that and having frameworks and models and perspectives of translating the data you have to customer value. And that's how we'll move this industry forward.
It's an industry level challenge for everyone, right? Because especially over the last 5 years, there's been a much kind of broader decentralization or democratization of products and tools and things that people use in companies, right? It's very frequent where a group or a team or an org or something will buy a product that's purpose intended for their specific group, and the company will still have kind of overarching enterprise level systems as well. And the challenge when it comes to RevOps and all of that is the data that you need is in those individual systems. So how do you facilitate democratization of, IT solutions that are purpose oriented while still extracting and understanding your customer and your operational flows across all of these spaces? So it's a big challenge, and that's where having RevOps and that RevOps function in a business is becoming even more critical, because that team is working on aligning those operational data points, processes, and systems so that every individual group is still empowered to go what they need to do from a technology or an operational perspective, but that we don't lose sight of how and what we need to operate across the business. So it's becoming, in my mind, even more important as we continue into these kind of layers and magnitudes of systems and data.
Could not agree more. We're seeing that with every enterprise customer that we're talking to and they're hearing that from their peers, their boards. So I had two companies I spoke with. I spoke with this chief customer officer and chief revenue officer of these two companies, and they said they're both private equity backed. They said there's a conference with their private equity investors, brand name, big companies, big funds. And the entire conference is about, what are you doing with your data, your AI? How we need to do something with this. There's no strategies, like go figure it out. They're literally creating budgets, AI enablement, data enablement budgets to go and do some R&D and figure it out, because we need to have a strategy around leveraging this in a productive way. So it's really, really fascinating, and it's the time to move that forward.
And then in those circumstances, just with the amount of data that's getting created through the various AI tools and services and models and everything that's coming forward, plus the scaled data that we're getting through all enterprise systems, whether it's CRMs or customer engagement solutions, various things like that. The challenge is you can't functionally connect every piece of data and get value from it. So the goal is not connecting everything. The goal needs to be connecting what matters.
Yes, finding the path through the mountain, right? The
Exactly.
trailblaze.
Finding the path through the mountain. And the challenge here is that historically, so many companies have been in functional areas of expertise that they have been really kind of purpose-oriented solutions, and we haven't had in a scaled way had to work across all of these systems and data points. And that becomes a really big challenge, because we're having to learn language of each other and learn what value is across business as well.
Right. And another challenge here is siloing. Because we have so much data, we start to become myopic into our own function. And I know I've been guilty of this in prior lives, and it's natural, right? Where you have all this sales data. So you got sales analysts trying to figure out how do we drive funnel conversion. You've got marketing data from how do we generate more MQLs, CS for churn. It's like it's all part of the same journey, y'all, right? It's a customer value realization journey. If you're only looking at one piece of the pie and optimizing that, you're missing the bigger picture. And so I think this is also an opportunity to start to reconnect the silos that have sprung up in the name of efficiency and of specialization, but that forsakes effectiveness, right? And forsakes customer value. So
Well,
that's
the biggest thing is that all of these functions and, are necessary and they're purpose built to help organizations scale and drive efficiency and connect to customer. The challenge is that our customer doesn't experience our company in that way.
right,
And
right.
so when we take the customer centricity lens, our customers are really smart. And this is where that experience that I had at Amazon was so helpful for me to kind of connect my internal operations to that customer experience. Customers understand, they may not know the reason why, but they understand and they feel it when there are operational silos that result in differences of experience across your
Yes,
business, right? And
totally.
the customers feel that, they see it, they understand it, and very often those are the biggest areas where we can lose that customer trust and that customer value, and that opens up the opportunity for them to go look elsewhere, right? So it's in the best interest of not just the company, but of every one of those organizations to work together in a data-centric way to drive a consistent customer experience.
100%. We could have a whole other conversation on this, and we probably should honestly have part
Probably
two.
should. Yeah.
Part two. Awesome. Well, we're nearing the end of our episode here, Tiffany, and I want to take you through the audience favorite, which is the rapid fire question section. So
Okay.
here are the rules. I'm going to ask you 8 questions.
Okay.
You have 2 words max that you can
Oh,
use to answer the question. All right. Okay, I'll give you a couple 3-word answers. I know you might have a couple of those. So first thought that comes to mind, 3 words, 2 to 3 words max. Here we go.
okay.
What's the best metric of success for RevOps?
Your North Star.
All right. What's the worst metric of success for RevOps?
Ooh, well, I would say, what it worst metric success. I'm gonna say rate-based metrics.
What's an example of one of those for folks who may not know?
So a rate-based metric is generally, and I know that this is potentially going to be a little bit inflammatory, but rate-based metrics are generally, I generally call those vanity metrics, because they don't actually tell you the what and the why.
Right.
And so rate-based metrics are generally not helpful to really dig into customer experience unless there is massive organizational alignment on what is included in that rate-based metric and how to attack it. So, but that's a lot of where a lot of companies fall back on those because they become a little bit easier to help drive cross org alignment.
Got it. Usage, right? Rate-based metric.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Got it. Cool. All right. Going back to the questions here. What's the most underrated part of RevOps?
I would say the most underrated part, oh, 2 words. Oh, 2 words, 3 words. Cross business excellence.
Love it. What about the most overrated part?
Tech stack.
Too much.
Too much. Well, too much. And I'd say it's so critical, but it's also so overrated. Because teams and organizations have, have purchased purpose-built technology solutions. And the most overrated, but one of the most important parts is understanding how those tech stacks work left to right, as well as top to bottom. And the operational change management to get those things in line is very challenging
Very
and
challenging.
I would say very, very overrated.
Got it. What is the current state of RevOps?
Evolving and experimentation. Evolution and experimentation is what I would say. Yeah.
Awesome. Future state of RevOps.
AI. I mean, how
That
do
is
I not? How do I
not
not?
surprised.
Right?
Yeah.
It's AI.
What is the best book or podcast that you've learned from?
Oh, my absolute favorite book is The Goal. It's called The Goal by the author's last name is by Goldblatt. And this is one of my favorite books in the business world because it's equal relationship advice and supply chain management. And it sounds really weird that I would, recommend a supply chain book for RevOps, especially in the SaaS industry. Go read the book. It will change how you approach problem solving, to be really systematic and methodical, to really unblock areas of revenue kind of blockage in your business.
Awesome. We'll just check that one out. And then the final question here is, what is the best community that you've been a part of?
So one of my favorite communities recently is Wednesday Women, and you can find them on LinkedIn. One of the things that I just, I've been in the tech industry for a long time. One of the things that I really appreciate is women celebrating and elevating other women in the industry, especially in the place of revenue leadership, revenue operations, thought leadership, which has historically been a very, male-dominated area of the tech industry. And so I really appreciate the fact that they're elevating these incredible leaders across the space and helping educate the industry that there are just incredible female sellers and leaders and thought leaders, and that we are here and we've been here a long time, and that we're ready to go.
Love it. We'll have to post that one in the comments as well. All right, so last question here. We'll keep this also, you can get a couple more than 3 words, but
Okay, thank you.
We'll keep this yeah, brief as well. But what if you could make one prediction about the future of our industry? I'm going to keep it intentionally vague. What would it be?
I would say, okay, intentionally vague, the future of our industry. I think that our industry is going to become even more interconnected with all core operational functions of the business. And that's a very kind of different space than we've been historically. And I mean that because we are collectively understanding there are so many value realization moments and customer success that lead to upsell, cross-sell, that in creating marketing moments to create demand generation, we have to be able to receive those in a way that scales across sales, across operations, across support. Those historically have operated by necessity in kind of functional silos. And I think the future is really us continuing in a revenue operations and a growth space to continue to interconnect and help each of those functions build mechanisms of trust that allow them to scale with that customer at the center. And the only caveat I'll say is it doesn't mean that the customer wasn't at the center before, but it's a different understanding of the customer.
I think that resonates so deeply with a lot of the themes we've discussed today, and we'll see where it goes. We'll come back in 5 years, Tiffany, and we'll see how your prediction fared.
We'll see.
No,
and AI. So
and AI.
and
Yeah.
AI.
Awesome. Well, before we wrap up, is there anything you'd like to plug with our audience? Anything that you're working on, or if you want to be contacted, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, I would say get in touch with me through LinkedIn. I'm Tiffany Gonzalez with a Z at the end, and we can include the link in the notes and whatnot. And I think the biggest thing is just I love to connect on conversations around revenue creation and value realization, right? That's one of my favorite areas, just to really deep dive and geek out on. And so please continue to connect with me there. And I appreciate everybody spending time today.
Likewise, this was awesome. Thank you so much, Tiffany, for coming on the show, and I'm sure our audience is going to love this episode. So thanks so much, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
All right, thanks so much.
Once again, thank you for listening. This episode is brought to you by Foresight. If you're interested in learning more, please email them at info@gainforesight.co. That is info@gainforesight.co. Thank you.